Hey, it's Mistress Carrie, reporting for duty from MCHQ for episode 32 of the Mistress Carrie podcast. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by Digital Federal Credit Union. But I can just say DCU, and you know exactly who I'm talking about. Whether you bank at one of their branches or you use their mobile app to do your banking, DCU is committed to putting the needs of their members first. This month, one of their oldest branches in New England is relocating. For over 20 years, the team at DCU's Hudson, New Hampshire branch has been doing the right thing by their members, and they'll continue to do that. They're just going to be at their new location at the Flagstone Crossing Plaza, which is also in Hudson, New Hampshire. What could DCU mean to you? Find out for yourself at dcu.org. This episode of the podcast is also sponsored by MistressCarrie.com. The website is out there, and it's growing every day. You can find every episode of the Mistress Carrie podcast, every after-action report, every sit rep, plus every episode of Cocktails in the War Room. Whew, it's a lot. Plus, you'll find my blog, photo galleries, the events calendar, which is full of awesome live-streamed concerts that the bands are doing right now. And you'll find the official online Mistress Carrie store, where you can get Mistress Carrie t-shirts and sweatshirts and Cocktails in the War Room gear, beanies, pint glasses, shot glasses. There's even stuff to outfit your new badass home office. At least I hope your new home office is badass. So just go to MistressCarrie.com for everything. Okay, episode 32 of the podcast is something I've wanted to do for a while. Frank Sgambellone I have known for years. We actually tried to figure out exactly when we met. I think I figured it out, but I could be wrong. He works for a company called Clair Global, which does a lot of things, but what Frank does for them is he's a front-of-house sound engineer for live concerts. You know, that guy behind that giant board with all the knobs on the floor at the concerts? That guy. Frank's been doing it almost 30 years. And he's local. He's from Rhode Island originally. He's worked with everyone from Linda Ronstadt and the Beastie Boys to Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, Stained, Godsmack, and right now he works with Bryan. Well, when the world's not shut down because of COVID. I thought it'd be really interesting to hear from somebody that's on that side of the music we love. What's it like to tour? Exactly what he does all day. The science behind the gear and the technology. How did he get into it? Plus, he's got some great stories about practical jokes that get played on the road and some behind-the-scenes anecdotes on the artists that we love. The bands we love and the music that is the soundtrack to our lives has a lot of people involved that you don't get to see every day. And Frank is one of them. And he knows what he's talking about. So allow me to introduce you to Frank Sgambellone.
Hey, what's up? This is Sully from Godsmack. Strap on those boots, baby, because you are now in the trenches of the war room with the one and only Mistress Carrie right here on the Mistress Carrie podcast.
What's up? This is Joe Rogan, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie.
Her hair so lovely. Pretty eyes.
Hey, this is Brent from Shinedown, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie. Hey, Carrie, go put your bra on, girl.
Hey, this is Steven Tyler, and you be listening to the baddest bitch in Boston, Mistress Carrie.
What's up? This is Aaron from Stain, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie.
Hi, everybody. This is Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters, and you're listening to the one, the only Mistress Carrie.
Hey, this is David from the band Disturbed, and you're listening to the baddest bitch in Boston, Mistress Carrie.
This is Marilyn Manson, and you're listening to the baddest bitch in Boston, Mistress Carrie.
Hi, this is Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. You're listening to Mistress Carrie.
This is Dennis Leary. You are listening to my favorite, Mistress Carrie.
Hey, this is Corey from Stone Sour, and you have the privilege of listening to Mistress Carrie. Oh, God. Oh, yeah.
Okay, the recording light's on. We're on the record, Frank.
How are you? Good evening.
I'm so good. Thank you for doing this.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I know that you haven't spent the greater part of your adult life being the one on this side of the microphone, but I appreciate that you wanted to sit down with me.
Well, it's always a fun time. I think the last time we saw each other before tonight. It was at the Shinedown show in Boston.
Yeah, at the Pavilion.
That's right.
Yeah, Bad Flower played, Dinosaur Pileup played.
Roaring. How good was
Back in the
that?
great old days when we could go to concerts and hang out with our friends in person.
And good guys, you know. I love the Shinedown guys. They've been a part of my a big part of my career as well, right? They at the beginning with Godsmack, the early time with them. They were one of the support bands on the tour with Zombie. So it goes back a long way, and it was a lot of fun that night to see a lot of people that I hadn't seen for a while.
Well, it was really funny to be, you know, you and I are going to have a lot of conversation because obviously you're an audio engineer, and so we're going to talk about this. But you went to the show for fun that night, which is not something you do very often. And we were standing out at what they call the front of house, and I want to make sure people understand what that is. So when you go to a concert, the sound board where they do the lights and the sound and all of that stuff that they always have in the middle of the floor, that's normally where you work all the time.
Yeah.
And sometimes you guys let friends and family kind of hang out in there because it's a really good place to watch a show. And so you and I were kind of the friends and family that got to sit in the cool seats. And you weren't the one standing behind the board twisting the knobs and pushing the faders. You were just there watching the show. It was cool because I don't think I had ever just watched a show with you before.
Yeah, it's not that often that I don't go to them that often. It's not that I don't like it. I don't want to. It's just I'm at home and I got the family, and there's not much that's going to interest me that comes to town if I don't know who it is. And most
it's like being a hooker and having to have sex on your night off. It's like it's still fun, but really, can you just give me a night off?
No, it was the great Andy Meyer mixing the show. He was Shinedown's front of house mixer. It was a surprise. I had no idea he was there. And it turned out to be a really great night of seeing a bunch of friends, listen to a great band, and listen to other people complaining. Just the crazy, a drunk dude. I can't hear the snare. Yeah, no, what do you think? What do I think? I think I don't get drunk in the middle of an arena and do critical listening. You dope. Get out of here. Go have another Mike's Hard Cider or whatever it is you're doing.
That was one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about because you have this amazing career and everybody that goes to concerts sees the guy that does your job because you're right there in the middle of the crowd and you're the guy that makes their favorite band sound amazing. But I also think that people walk by you a lot and don't really understand what it is that you're doing in there. So I want to go back to the beginning. Because your love of music comes from a background where you were actually in bands as a musician, right?
Yeah. I started off, we'll say early 80s. It'd have to be like in my high school years, maybe as a junior, senior, so it would have been about 84, 85. I was fairly proficient guitar player, and I played with some rock bands, one out of Rhode Island called Quake. We played, The Living Room, JR's Fastlane, and that kind of went away because we got older and everybody wanted to do their own thing and different things and just idiots.
Well, you realize you got to have a job too. Like, damn it, I got bills to pay.
Yeah, that was the worst part of it is working all day long and you're never making any money doing it. And then figured if I'm not going to make any money doing it and still be doing something with music, have fun with it. So there was another band I played in called the Flaming Donuts of Jesus. Funny enough. Yeah, I know.
Wait a minute. Hold on. That might be one of the greatest band names I've ever heard. How have I not heard of these guys?
I have no idea. It was probably, I don't know. I honestly
think
think
that's the greatest hashtag that's ever come to be, I think, on the Mistress Carrie podcast, the Flaming Donuts of Jesus.
Yeah. So that was the best group of musicians I played with. It was kind of like Journey meets Toto meets an aggravated white guy singing. It was just everybody was really good. We had a lot of fun, but it wasn't typical. We had a piano player, two brothers, the Fiala brothers, John and Jimmy, playing bass and drums together, who had been playing their whole lives. It was really solid. And we started rehearsing in another building at Soundstage Audio in Providence, owned by Dennis Verducci, right, who should be in the Rhode Island Music Hall of Fame by now if he's not. And it literally turned into a guy not showing up to work on the weekend, because it was the 80s. It was doing the butt. That was really what was popular, all the R&B and disco stuff. And a guy didn't show up for work one Friday night, and he called me at my house. And I didn't even have a driver's license at that point. You know, I was still 15 years old, 16 maybe. And he said, I need you to go do sound for this band in a club. And I was like, I don't know how to do sound. Oh, it's already set up. They've been playing there since Wednesday. You just got to go in, turn it on, sit behind a console. And I was like, I don't have a car. So he's like, can your mother drive you? And I said, yeah, I think so. Hang on. My mother, God bless her. I mean, literally, this was the thing. Because if she had said no, I would be somewhere else completely at this point.
And I'm trying to imagine, like, you come from a good Italian family in Rhode Island. Like, I'm trying to imagine your mom being like, Frankie,
yeah,
I don't want to go out. Why are you making me drive you?
Yeah, so he convinced her. She got on the phone with him. He told her what was going on. My mother puts her coat on. We drive to TF Green Airport. I think they call it the Providence Airport now. There was a little strip mall with a disco bar, like down in the basement. So I get there and they're like, who are you? I said, I'm supposed to help do sound for this band tonight. Like, you're a kid. And then the owner came up and they're like, what did he send you for? You know, so finally they talked to each other, convinced me to go in. They sat me down like, you know, in like a Denny's booth with the soundboard on it, really, and put a bouncer next to me to make sure I didn't get up or go drink. And I'm 15, 16. I'm in a bar full of gorgeous women. Everybody's drinking. Everybody's having a good time. The band is awesome. And I look like a hero.
They're the Flaming Donuts of Jesus.
No,
right?
this was a different band. This
that was the band you were in.
Yeah.
Oh. Do you remember the name of the band that you mixed that night?
I don't. I honestly don't. I was more concerned with looking at girls. I can't lie. But I mean, I'm that old. At that age, you know, you got priorities. And there was no way this was going any other way after that. It was like, oh my God, this is what goes on in these places? Can I do this all the time?
Wait, are you going to pay me?
Yeah. That was the other part, right? I'm going to get paid to go play around with gear and do this. And I was like, this is great. And I quickly had to learn. I would go in, you know, after school. My mom would drive me over to this place because I lived in Scituate, Rhode Island. He was in Providence, so I'd have to have her drive me over there until I finally got a driver's license. And then little by little, I learned how to set up PA systems, learned how to fix the stuff I broke. And it just kind of snowballed from there. And I got better and better, and I started to mix local bands. And the more I did sound, the less I actually played. So I kind of transitioned out of being a musician into being a PA tech and repair guy at that point.
It's funny that your career can make that weird change like that, because growing up, I always thought that I wanted to be a sound engineer in a recording studio. Because in my head, I had this image in the mid to late 80s, right, of being the one that knew what all the knobs did. I'm a kid, I'm an idiot. And I wanted to be the one in the recording studio when Motley Crue was recording a record and be in the middle of that party and the whole thing. And then I realized, A, I don't have any musical ability. B, I don't know what any of the knobs do. And C, when it came time for me to go to college, I couldn't even find a place to go to school to kind of learn how to do it. And so I ended up thinking, all right, well, if I'm going to get into audio stuff or whatever, I'll go to school for radio and audio, communications kind of stuff. And then I started working at the college radio station and started interning. Well, first I interned at a recording studio in Worcester called Licks Recording Studio.
Wow.
And it was around the corner from AAF. And one of the girls that I'm still friends with today that I went to college with, she was interning at AAF. I was interning at Licks, and we used to meet for lunch. And just to tell people that are listening that don't remember the world without the internet, Licks used to produce commercials that would air on AAF for their advertisers. And I used to have to run the tapes around the corner. And one day I was over there and in the middle of us recording a 27-piece mariachi band, which was not Motley Crue. And they were like, oh, you work over at Licks. How do you like it? And I was like, not very much. And it was Mitch Todd, who was the imaging guy at AAF, who now works at Sirius XM. And he was like, well, you can intern for me for the rest of the summer. I was like, oh, okay. And that's how I got my foot in the door at AAF as an intern, was because I hated basically doing what you do now.
Yeah. It's amazing how things happen, right?
You go into it thinking you're going to do one thing. Like you were going to be Eddie Van Halen.
I was praying, you know.
And then that did not happen.
No, I was more of a Randy Rhoads fan, actually.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
I get the idea. Yeah.
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 You just wanted to be this guitar player, man.
Yeah, that was all I could think of. And then I was, there's a lot of guys here that are a lot better than me. Remember, too, the 80s was everybody in Boston, this whole area of the country had unbelievable musicians. Everybody coming out of Berkeley. We had In the Pink, we had Extreme, we had the Rick Berlin Band with the Cars, Jay Giles, everybody, right? Some of them still, Aerosmith, Jesus, how am I going to forget that, right?
Yeah.
Like, there was all these musicians who were much better. It was like being, you could be an amateur boxer and be okay. You get in the ring with Triple G or somebody, you're going to get knocked out badly and get hurt. This was not playtime. A lot of people were coming to one of the best schools for music that exists on the earth, and they were producing a lot of great musicians. And then you realize, the Clint Eastwood line, right? Man's got to know his limitations. Well, I'm not really good enough to hang with these guys, but for some reason, I still took to the technical side of it and brought like music to it.
Did you always know were you always technical growing up? Like, were you always that person that could take something apart and put it back together, or that was playing around with the speakers of your hi-fi system or something?
Not yet. I could take things that sounded bad and make them sound better. That was really the skill I had. And to this day, I think it serves me because I don't really have a whoopee. You hear a lot of guys crying about, I want this PA, I got to have that thing, I got to have this black box, whatever. I don't really kind of work like that. Cause
you're a MacGyver guy. Give me a stick of gum and a tampon and I can make the band sound good.
Well, not quite, but my sensibilities are toward the song. As a musician, I'm more worried about, does the song sound like a song, or does it sound like I put Metallica's kick drum with Eddie Van Halen's guitar and, Rush's overheads? There's things that don't make sense to me. And I don't know if there's a better way to explain it. It just anytime I interview somebody that is as proficient in their profession as you, I always want to make sure that I'm acknowledging that there's a lot of people, including myself, that have no idea what the hell you're talking about most of the time. And like a few weeks ago, I interviewed Nuno, and he was talking about guitar tone and sound and talking about, he literally played Eddie Van Halen's rig in front of Eddie Van Halen. His guitar, his pedals, his cables, his PA, his everything. And he was disappointed that he still sounded like Nuno Bettencourt, because there's a certain amount that the gear and everything can bring you, and then you have to be that person to go the rest of the way. Jerk.
And
Jerk. That's like Cindy Crawford being upset she's not Marilyn Monroe. Jerk. Right? That guy, watching him as a kid. Destroying,
it's ridiculous.
Yeah, destroying everybody. Again, one of the best musicians. That guy, what does he do now? He plays with everybody and their mother.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, he's got a studio in L.A. in his house, and he does. But he idolized Eddie so much that he was like, "This is the one chance where I'm actually going to live out this childhood dream of being able to sound like Eddie Van Halen." And he even said he was disappointed that he could only sound like himself. So it's like what you're talking about is making sure that no matter what gear, no matter what's going on, that you're making the music in all of its pieces sound as cohesive as it can as a final product.
Yeah, I'm not a band member, right? I don't look at myself as like putting a stamp on the song. that the band is playing. Like, again, and I don't say this like to sound big-headed, but my clients and the clients of the company I work for are not small. They are on records. Some of them are, they're going to go to the grave leaving stuff that's going to live way past me and themselves, right? So there's a respect you have to take to the music that you're mixing. I'm not trying to change what the band sounds like to fit what I do.
They already recorded it and worked with a producer and made the final product. It's just your job to replicate it as close as you can.
Yeah.
Live.
Yeah. And that's served me well for a long time. Sometimes bands don't want that. Sometimes they want it bigger. They want it, they want, because they're not going to play it the same way. But it depends on who it is that's in front of you. And if you only know how to do one thing, it doesn't always work. So I guess being flexible, with the skill, with the equipment, you still have to listen to, I don't know. It's hard. It's really hard to describe. I don't ever want to get in the way of what the guys on stage are trying to put into the audience because I'm doing weird things or I'm going to try stuff. It's not a place.
And that better than they do.
Yeah, they can have that fight with the producer in the studio who wants them to do the third lick of the bridge 8 times. Like I don't. It's not for me to do. I have to be consistent, right? My bigger problem in my own head from doing this is that sometimes I forget that there are limitations to what I can do, but as a music fan, like I remember being that kid who was in the upper bowl and it sounds like dog shit.
Right.
And my concern is making sure that guy always hears as good a show as I have in the middle of the floor. That's my bigger concern, is that everybody goes away as happy as possible with what we've done. And, after 30 years just about of doing this from bars to stadiums, the gear's gotten better. The testing equipment, the way we go approach these things has gotten way better. And if it hadn't, I would still be trying really hard to make it as good as possible.
Well, talk to me about you. I mean, you talk about the venues. So not only do you have this challenge of trying to replicate something that the band and the producer toiled over for months in the recording studio, and you got to replicate it live, but you got to replicate it live in a different place every day. Sometimes it's indoors, sometimes it's outdoors. So, you're configuring the equipment differently every day. And there is a difference between being a sound guy in the old Boston Garden and being a sound guy in the TD Garden now. Because the buildings, when you talk about the equipment getting better, the buildings weren't designed for concerts back in the day. They were designed for the sporting events. And we can make the argument that the old Garden wasn't even designed for that with the poles.
No, it's they don't build these places for us. It's really the long and short of it. They don't build them for us, but we try to aim everything. If you could just think of it as a light bulb or a flashlight, if you would. You're just trying to light up the seats with people in them. You're not trying to light up anything with the ceiling and dumb things, just things that we didn't know about back then.
Yeah.
There was no way to predict it. I mean, nowadays you can, we have software and system angles and things that are all come into play with how you curve the systems, where you point it, basically, where you just eliminate as much of the problems as you can. You can, Julie Matway, a wonderful promoter rep, said to me a couple of years ago, and I was actually kind of hurt when she said it at the time, and then I realized, she figured it out. She said, "You guys are just a bunch of nerds who play with things that are invisible." And I was like, well,
can't argue with that.
No, I tried. I tried. And then I realized, like a lot of people think they know about sound because I don't know. I don't know. It's really a hard thing. Nobody goes to bother the lighting guy to tell him it's too bright. Nobody bothers the pyro guy because it's too loud. But they all have some kind of thing to say about how a show sounds. And the least, if you're never in a review in a newspaper or an article, that's a great thing. You should be unobtrusive. Like I was
Right.
out of the picture.
You don't want to be it sounded terrible last night and the band persevered.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It sounds like something you've read somewhere. No, we don't want to be that guy.
So when you made the decision that this was going to be your job, this wasn't like an overnight thing. It just kind of happened that way. But you got to go professionally from being the kid in the booth with the bouncer and the chicks to being the guy that actually has to know what the hell he's doing. Is that all learned on the job, or did you go to school to figure this out, and what did you study?
It was a combination of both. Up until I was about 24, it was a night job. I went to work in a construction company because I didn't, at that point, going to school for music was not really an option. So I took a day job, like everybody, and then I would work for the same company on the weekends. And I learned there, practical, don't put a gigantic system in a bar. You don't need to do that. And I was an idiot oh, sure. The owner would say, yeah, you want to drag it down into some upstairs bar? Fine. Go ahead.
How heavy this shit is.
Yeah. So you learn the practical experience there. What do you really need to do it with? And then it got to a point where I needed to shit or get off the pot. And I took a job as a stagehand, and I worked at Great Woods. This was right around 92. And my first season there, I saw the Moody Blues, and I think John Cougar might have still been John Cougar at that point, Chicago. And then we went over to do Earth Day in Foxborough Stadium. And it was the biggest sound system I had ever seen in my life. I mean, it was Clair Brothers S4 system, very, very big boxes, very, very big stadium system. And I was enamored with it. Like, I had never seen anything that big before. I had never seen anything go up and down like it did then. It was completely foreign to me. It would have been like taking a kid out of the jungle and showing him the front of the space shuttle. It was nothing by comparison. And so I started asking questions. How did you learn to do this? And at that point, most of the answers were, well, we just, we worked here, there, or whatever, and started doing this for our friends' bands and wound up. And
there's no roadie college.
Well, there isn't. It's not really a roadie college. It's I went to Full Sail Center for the Recording Arts in Orlando. First, going back just a little bit, my idea at that point was I figured I could do what these guys do, but these guys all know how to fix the equipment that's out there. Right? They all know what to do with it. So I thought, I'm going to go to New England Tech. So I did, and I studied electronics for 2 years there. And while I was studying there, I was getting as much as I could out of working. I was mixing bar bands. I was making the rounds through like Boston, New Hampshire, Connecticut, some bands in New York. I was doing a lot of work for all the local bands. And then realized, like, hey, there's a school that teaches this. You can get a degree. And while I was at school, I was doing Genesis, We Can't Dance, as a stagehand. And I was in Gillette Stadium, and I remember this Australian guy just one, all like for an hour, just counting one. It turned out to be Howard Page, Chief of Engineering at Shoko, who is probably one of the greatest engineers that's ever been in live sound. And then they started doing line check, and I got to hear Chester Thompson's drum set like through this massive system that didn't look like anything else. And that was a company called Shoko, and that was when I said, I want to work for these guys. I literally that was the day I said, I want to work for this company. I don't know who this is. And they had this massive, just it looked like two giant speakers. It didn't look typical. So I again started asking questions. And some of the guys there were kind enough to let me know, like, listen, we hire people out of this school in Florida. That's the only place we take interns from. And if you can hang for 6 weeks with the shop staff while they beat you up, then you wind up working for us and we put you on the road. So I finished electronics school. Well, a week later, I got in the car. I drove to Florida and did another year down there. Came home for a week and then drove right to Texas. And I moved to Dallas, Texas. And I started working for them about 5-6 months later, just breaking their balls, calling them constantly. What do you need? When do you need a guy? I could come in and do whatever you want. It was that. And then while I was waiting to work for them, a group of us that all moved there together at the same time. It was like 5 of us living in an apartment like animals. Like animals, right? And we all started going around town and just go to every company, all 5 of us. Like, we can fix cables, I can fix amplifiers, we can do this, we can, we know how to do all this stuff. None of us knew anything, practically, right?
Fake it till you make it, baby.
Yeah, just lie your way into the door. So we all got jobs while we waited for our careers to take off or die, do whatever. And that was the start. And they gave me a shot. Richard Bratcher, president of the company. I walked in for the interview, and there's the Australian guy that was on the floor of Gillette Stadium, Wan. And they looked at my, resume, like as if it meant anything to them. And they said, yeah, you finished electronics school. That's great. You're never going to fix anything. And I said, what? Yeah, mate, we don't do that here. Like, if you break something, you're going to mail it back, and we're going to send you
a replacement. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I was like, why did I do all of that? Why? But that was the start. And they beat me up in the shop for 6 weeks. I went to every department, amplifiers and drives and speakers and the wood shop and cables, where nobody wanted to go. But I did wind up working on consoles, funny enough, because I had a practical experience on repairing gear. And the other interns hated me. They thought I was in the greatest place on earth because I was playing with consoles all day long. What they didn't know is that I had pink noise going through them with headphones, every single knob, every single switch, while noise was going onto my headphones to pick up any scratches or, anything that sounded weird while I was moving a knob. I'd have to write down, and then I'd have to go back and fix it. And it was tedious and it was exacting. But
what's pink noise? Is it, I know what white noise is. Is it the same kind of thing? Is it different frequency?
So white noise is when you have the TV, the old analog TVs between stations, the white screen, poltergeist, that's white noise. It's all frequency at equal volume. Pink noise is used a pinking filter, and every octave from, like, say, 100 cycles to 200 cycles, 200 cycles to 400 cycles, every time you increase it by an octave, the noise goes down by 3 dB. So you'd have this slope that tilts down as you go up the high end. So white noise is used to test electronics, like ICs and tubes and things like that. And pink noise is used to test components, speakers. If you put white noise to speakers, you could probably get away with it with like an 18-inch speaker, 15, maybe a 12. But if you put one through a high-end device, it will pop immediately because you're putting, we can only hear up to 20 kilohertz. Hopefully at my age, I can still hear somewhere reasonably close. I don't really know anymore. But yeah, that's the difference. It's just a different kind of test patterns, if you would. You got.
All right, so dBs is decibels for anybody that's like, what the hell are you talking about? And decibels is, to make it stupid simple for me because I'm an idiot, is basically just the loudness of it.
Yeah, were you talking about sound pressure levels?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's subjective. You hear crazy things. Oh, the guitar's 140. Well, it's actually not, because you would be bleeding out the eyes at that point. But yes, sound pressure levels, and so these are two different things. People tend to conflate them. At a sound pressure level and a dB in the electronic scale, dBV, dBu, they're different things. So before we confuse anybody, it's just they're measures used to test electronic equipment. And it's just a noise that won't blow up components when you're doing it.
Why, when people do sound check, do they use 1 and 2 all the time? Because for anybody that doesn't know anything about sound and anything about anything, you've been to a show and heard the guy up there going 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2. And after a while, you're like, oh my God. Why is it that?
Because you lift on 3.
Well, I know that.
It's just a habit. I used to use vowels. As a matter of fact, I got in huge trouble with that. Vowels. A, E, I, O, U. Hey, yeah. A, E, I, O, U. I don't know why. When I mixed monitors, I used vowels. It seemed to be the thing that would give people the most trouble. And I could just, make it sound reasonably good depending what box I had in front of me.
I didn't know if it was something like you need the 2 for the T's.
Maybe.
Like if you were trying, I always wondered that because that I was a roadie for a time.
Yeah.
Not great at it, but I did it for a while and loved it. And sometimes I would get asked to go up and talk, ironically, into the microphone while they did sound check. And I remember there was one engineer, you probably know him because you know everybody, that had me reading Dr. Seuss books because he was so annoyed with people with the 1 and the 2 that you would go up there and he would give you like socks on Fox or something.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen guys go up with a newspaper. They'll read a newspaper or just anything not to have, I don't know, anything not to drive people crazy. Now, everybody's driving everybody nuts with Steely Dan or, what is that? Random Access Memories, Daft Punk record.
Yeah.
Everybody, that's a big one. But now, if you play a Steely Dan track in a sound system, you're getting shit for it. No matter how good it sounds, it's been
the no stairway sign on Wayne's World at the guitar shop. It's like, just please don't. Can you just not, please?
Yeah, but that was the generally the start to my touring career.
What was the gig? What band was it that you were like, okay, I think I made it? Do you remember?
Oh, it still hasn't happened, really. No, I don't mean that like to be comical, but like they're all to me super important. Like I always learn something, no matter who I'm with, because I started off doing a ton of rock bands and funk bands, and there's a little bit of a similarity between the two, how you approach mixing it. And then there were country bands. And then there were R&B acts, and then nowadays you have a lot of acts with tracks, or you get an artist who's a he or a she, and that's your single focus. Everybody calls it like the money channel, like your vocalist, because it's the only thing, to the point where you start ignoring band members because it becomes more important to make sure that one thing is it. It's not an approach I have, but you see it a lot and you hear it a lot. I think I was really fortunate with Godsmack. I'd have to say that was a very fortunate thing because I had dabbled in mixing, actually touching gear and operating a console, because even when I got the job at Shoko, I was not really mixing anything. I was a PA monkey. I was a mechanic. I didn't do anything. I just put it up, sat there, waited for something to burn, replaced it, and that was it. I was a pit crew member, if that is something of an analogy.
Yeah.
I worked on the car. Somebody else drove it. But during that time, I got sent out on a couple of tours where there was nobody to operate like a monitor console, which is the console that the artists are listening to on stage for all the wedges, so they can hear themselves. There was nobody there, and I already had, I know what I'm doing. So I wound up mixing monitors for Iggy Pop, and that was a rough one, right? They must have smelled the new on me. He had already been around a lot. I didn't know the history of him. I was not
when you're a new crew person, they can smell the new on you, and the hazing and the ball busting. It's on an epic. Like, I basically look at the years that I worked on crews as like basic training for the years I was on the air at AAF, because it prepared me to be able to take an amount of ball busting that I think most people, especially I think most women in a room full of guys, would not even volunteer to take.
Yeah, the girls definitely, hands down, get it worse. And I've always made the joke, like, no matter where you are, anywhere on planet Earth, at 1:30 in the morning, there's always a woman pulling feeder somewhere.
And that was me.
The guys are smoking cigarettes. They've abandoned everything, or they're standing around a truck telling each other what they did the night before. And there's some woman over there with 4 guys. Come on, let's go. Let's get this done.
The feeder cable is the first stuff that they unpack because it's the cable that plugs into the electrical panel of the building and feeds the power for everything. And so therefore, if you go in reverse, it's the last thing to get packed up because you need the power to take everything else apart. And it's big and it's dirty and it's heavy and it's a thankless job. And it's what they give the noobs.
Yeah.
You always know that you're fucked when they're like, take care of the feeder cable.
Yeah. You want to, so I'll give you, I'm probably going to tell you a couple things I shouldn't. But my very, very first day touring was the Moody Blues. I was so excited. I was like, I'm finally on tour. I'm on my way. I'm doing this job. And I ran the feeder cable backward. Yeah. So I didn't want to tell anybody. That I'd done it. So I reversed, I think, almost 600 feet in 50-foot sections. You know, I turned it around myself. I didn't tell the stagehands, nothing, in a baseball field in Vancouver. And I was so mortified that I had done it. I didn't want to tell anybody. Like, your first day, this is really how it's going to go.
That's something that you get your balls busted about 30 years later in your career. Remember that day?
Remember that day? Yep. But yeah, I actually did that. You know, I was not always good at. I was not always any good.
I worked for a company that got smart about it, and they built adapters that if you ran the feeder backwards, you went into the bin, and it had the other end on it, so you didn't have to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, we were not that fortunate. Yeah, we were not that fortunate. But it's like, as far as, like you said, like when I felt like I made it, I thought I was really doing well when they asked me to mix Godsmack, because that was really, it was an unknown everything. I didn't know anything about them. I'm from the area, but I was living in Texas, so I didn't know anything about them as a local band. I had, by that time, I had done, you know, Moody Blues, Linda Ronstadt, Soundgarden, the Beastie Boys, I think Janet Jackson, Phil Collins. That was the first group of bands that I toured with. And then I got a call from the company and said, hey, you got to go out and take care of these guys. They're from your neck of the woods. They're going to blow up huge. They need a guy. And it was for Ozfest in 99, right? The Sabbath reunion.
Yep,
of all
I remember
things,
it.
right?
I was there, yeah.
So we got to rehearsals in Florida. We had one day with them, and it was awful.
Is this where I met you?
It may have been.
I think that's where I met you, was that tour when it came home.
Oh, most likely, yeah.
Yeah.
But it was the first show, horrific. I mean, Sully was throwing things everywhere. Just
Elvis.
Great. Oh, we call every singer's in Elvis. Every singer's in Elvis. Every drummer's a Ringo. You know, I call bass players jockos, you know, and guitar players, they never really bother anybody. So you can call them by their own name. There's no story to tell where you have to hide the artist's name. So.
Oh, man.
Yeah, but the first 2 shows, they were not good. They were, you know, I was probably going to get fired. And their tour manager at the time, Bob Dallas, called me on the day off and said, hey, Frankie.
Bob Dallas sounded like he had been ripping the filters off his cigarettes since he was 4.
Yeah, that guy was
he sounded like Wolfman Jack, to give like a radio reference. Like, that's what he sounded like.
Yeah, God bless him. He called me and said, these guys want to talk to you. Come over to the hotel. And I went over to the hotel they were staying in, and it was mayhem, right? Because it was the first time I talked to them since the rehearsal at the first show, because Ozfest is like, oh, you got 5 minutes before the next band goes on. It's no conversations. Get up, get off, get up, get
There's
off.
There's a difference between being the band that's the headliner. Like in this instance, Black Sabbath has a different setup than every other band on the main stage of Ozfest because it's their show. When you're the headliner, you can do as much as you want, take up as much of the stage as you want, take as long to sound check if you want. And the earlier the band goes on in the night, the less time they've had to prepare.
Yeah, pretty much. The big kids get to stay up late. It's
right.
The other kids get to go away in the afternoon, go play, But I went over and I met them, and they were super nice guys. I was like, wow, this is not the dude that I'm seeing, standing in front of me on stage. He's a psychopath when he's out there. And a couple of hours of a conversation with the guys about how to smooth things out for them made all the difference. And I kind of settled in, and I wasn't so new anymore. And things worked out pretty good. 13 years with those guys. I spent 7 of them, behind the monitor console on stage with them. And the next 6.5 years at front of house. And that was really the turning point for me. And that happened in the middle of the Metallica tour on St. Anger.
Is that the In the Round tour?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Their front of house guy retired, and they pulled me into a dressing room one night after a show, and they said, you need to make a decision. And I was like, well, if I'm, you're not happy with the work I'm doing, I guess you can hire somebody else. I'll help you find somebody. He's got no douchebag. Do you want to stay mixing monitors, or you want to move to front of house? And I was like, oh, I'm going to front of house. He's like, you can always come back and mix monitors for us if it doesn't work out. I was like, there's no chance I'm ever going back to that chair again, dude. I'm getting away from you.
So to explain the difference, because like we talked about before, the front of house mix is the area in the middle of the floor at the arena where you're mixing the band so that you're in the crowd and the sound is for the crowd. Explain why it is that a band needs a second board and they need the monitor wedges, the speakers that the singer always puts his foot on.
Yeah.
The Scott Stapp speaker that everybody imagines, the with arms wide open speaker that he puts his foot on, the Captain Morgan speaker. Yeah. Why is it that bands need a whole other sound guy just for themselves?
So to in this age, we'll talk about the modern age, right? Most artists now are on in-ear monitors, right? It's basically headphones with a radio system. So everybody on stage has a left and right. I, at front of house, for the audience, only have a single left and right. So I only produce one left and right. The whole audience listens to that. The guy on stage has to produce a left and right for everybody who's on stage. And everybody wants to hear things differently. Monitor engineer is an unsung hero. The garbage men of sound, really. They get beat up by the band, but the singer needs to hear something different than the guitar player.
That's what I was getting to. And you come from a musical background as a guitar player, which is why I asked you about that earlier. So to use Godsmack as an example, why does what Sully hears, why is it different from what Tony hears? And why is what Tony hears, why does it have to be different from what Robbie hears?
Well, they're in different places on stage. Like the singer is going to be 90% of the time with the drummer right on his back. So the drums are not really having to be that loud where he's standing because he's already getting them. But he might not hear what's off to one side of the stage or the other where other amplifiers are. So the speakers that are sitting on the floor in front of him, you're going to put the things he's missing in them according to how he wants to hear it. And you have to have, a very, very good skill set to deal with that, because you're dealing with 4 personalities or 5 or however many people there are on stage, mood swings, whether the guy shows up, to work that night or to play, it changes, and you got to be able to deal with it.
Imagine being the monitor guy for Slipknot.
Oof. Wow. 9 guys banging on hammers and kegs. Yeah.
Can I have a little more keg in my ears, please?
I haven't heard the horrible anvil sound in 10, 20 minutes. Bang on it again.
So when you go from the monitor guy that's like off to the side of the stage, like if you're watching the band, you kind of see him off to the side.
Yeah, generally.
And he's usually the guy that in between songs, the lead singer's yelling at.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen that. If you know the monitor engineer's name from the audience, he's having a bad night. You know, Bryan, can you make this sound like music?
I can't hear anything. Well, for you, it got to the point with Godsmack where you ruined one of their biggest songs for me, and I think a lot of other people that know the band, because I Stand Alone became Frank Sgambellone. And now I'm ruining it for everyone that's listening to this interview because Sully would sing it that way sometimes.
I heard him play that riff. We were finishing up. We were the album before that. And I forgive me for not remembering what album cycle we were in. They tended to run together because we never went home. Those guys worked.
Yeah.
But he was on stage just putzing around one day with his guitar, and he busts out the guitar riff from that. And I stopped. I was like, "Whoa, that's a good riff right there. You should open a song with that." He turns around, asshole, I'm going to open the next record with this. Right? So, they were joking around, and they carried the studio with them in the dressing room. So they would go in and, jam out and record it, and they recorded it, the demo of it on the tour. And then they took it in, and when I saw them next, after, hearing the record, I was like, oh, this is really good. Didn't even put two and two together. At that point, I was touring with Sevendust. I was mixing them on the Animosity tour right before that record came out. And, Morgan Rose had heard the song, and Morgan started screaming that at me every day. And it just became a thing. And they did a show together on New Year's at the Hard Rock. Do you remember?
Yep.
That show, that was the end of the Sevendust show and right into the Godsmack tour that was about to start. It was my last day with Sevendust and the beginning of the tour with Godsmack. Morgan started screaming that thing out, and it became the thing. Yep. Everybody thought it was the funniest joke.
Still funny to me. I know you're sick of it, but still funny to me.
It's hilarious. I love those guys to death. My God.
Well, it's funny that Sully was so up about I Stand Alone to you, but I remember him showing up at my condo in that big red pickup truck going, you need to come outside, I need you. And I was like, what? And I went out, and he's like, I need to play this for you, and I need you to not bullshit me because I'm on a deadline. We were asked to put this song out because it was The Mummy of the soundtrack.
Oh, right, yeah.
And I need to know if it's good, and this could make or break the band and make or break the career. And Sully and I have always kind of had our careers kind of going in these same places at the same time. And I remember he was doing like 100 miles an hour on 495 in that pickup truck. And that was the first time I listened to I Stand Alone. Yeah. And then it ended. And when I went to open my mouth, he was like, listen to it again. Because he was afraid that I hated it and wanted me to hear it twice before I gave him my opinion. And even like you listen to that song once, you know it's going to be a smash. I mean, it's like you said, like the riff is awesome.
Yeah, the riff it's one of those, again, it's a musical thing. You hear it, you're going to remember it.
Yeah. Now everyone will think of you.
I hope not. No offense to anybody. Man, that joke is like old as fuck now.
I know, but we're old as fuck, dude. I hate to tell you, it's been that long.
I know. The other night, I'll tell you some funny, like speaking of Sevendust, my wife and I watched the live stream the other night.
Oh, the Animosity live stream.
Oh, it's crushing, right?
I know.
So we were sitting on the couch, and she looks at me and she's like, do you think Clint is hot? And I was like, what the fuck? What? And she's like, no, in the shirt. He's wearing that collared shirt, buttoned all the way up with the long sleeves. I was like, Jesus Christ, woman.
When I interviewed Morgan recently, we talked about him and John Connolly specifically and what specimens of health and fitness those guys are now compared to Sevendust back in the day when we were all partying like idiots.
24/7
Sevendust. Yeah, and now you see these guys, and John's doing triathlons and Clint's doing CrossFit, and it's like, who are you guys?
Yeah, they were formidable. They still are. I mean, they were That's another bunch that like you hang on for dear life. Hang on. It's just, it never ends.
There
You
was
never
a
know what's
time that
coming.
if you were a band and if you toured with Sevendust, it was like guaranteed that you were going to become famous because they were that band that literally broke everybody.
Yeah. But the thing was, like, they were burning everybody alive if they opened for them. You know, that was a band you don't follow.
Oh yeah.
Still is. I mean, still is. They've not dropped a step.
No.
it's
Arguably, they're
hard.
better now because they're all healthy and they're all, for the most part, sober and like, it's just that we're all getting a little older now.
I don't know. Again, maybe they're, maybe you could say they're healthier, but there was an element of danger to that band on stage every night.
Yeah.
Right? And that's really the hair-raising stuff. You know, there's been a few artists in my life where the first time you see it in front of you and the hair stands up on your neck. Doesn't happen very often. I mean, I'm not jaded. It still happens, but they were one of them. You know, and again, I'm very fortunate to have spent a lot of time with a lot of great bands and artists that I had a lot of respect for. And some of them I hated when I got there, but learned real fast. Like, this is not what I thought it was, or they're not the people I thought, you know. But if you're spending day and night, month after month, stuck in a tour bus, under stress and traveling and all that, you really do get to know how people really are. Yeah, that's not a joke. That's not to be taken lightly. That's a very, very true statement. It's true. Because I ask the bands all the time, like, when it comes to like keeping a bus clean and like, I mean, imagine being married to 5 different people and you're all stuck in a giant metal tube driving around the country. Like, who would sign up for that? What guy would have 5 wives in a bus and drive around the United States for 3 months? Who would sign up for that? Nobody. It can be rough. That's the part of it nobody really wants to talk about. Cheese feet, cold farts, pizza that's been sitting for 4 hours before you get to it. There's 8 people you don't know already there when you show up. Somebody shits in the bathroom on the bus. Oh, God almighty. It's always somebody's guest too, right? Of course, because everybody that's on the bus knows not to poop on the bus. Yeah. It's the rule. It's unbelievable. The horrors, the humor and the horrors. It really goes both ends of the spectrum. When you pull in, and I want to go through like the day. Okay. So you go to load in. And when you're on a tour, and like you said before, the company that you work for, Clair Brothers, and your career, you've been around for so long, you're on big tours. These are big, giant, moving machines. So if you're doing a stadium tour, it's 50 trucks, or they started building the scaffolding for the stage last week and whatever. But if you're doing like a big arena tour, where you don't have the stage being built way ahead of time, and the whole tour is like moving together day to day, run me through the day sheet of like from the time the first truck pulls in and like what the schedule is and the pecking order of what truck gets unpacked, who goes to work first. Okay. Because you're not the guy that gets out of bed first because you're the audio guy. You're the front of house, the sound guy. I still get up pretty early. I'm not a 2:00 arrival guy. Again, I still give a shit. So I can't allow other people to take the heat for what I have to do. I have to be a little bit responsible for it. Well, I'm responsible for all of it in the end, what it sounds like. And if they've done something I'm not cool with, I can't make them change it at 3 p.m. Right? It's not going to happen. So the very first people that go in, believe it or not, are the caterers. The unsung heroes of touring, right? Most of the time, tours now carry a cooking crew with them. They'll go in, they start cooking. They've shopped the night before. They'll have, refrigerators in the trucks or a way to keep fresh food fresh overnight. And they'll start doing breakfast and coffee. Following them right in are the riggers. And if anybody doesn't know what a rigger is, they're the psychopaths of every tour. They're the guys that climb up into the ceiling and make sure that we have motors, CM, like the old motors to hang lighting from, hang sound from.
Yeah, all of the chains that you see holding the PA and the lights and everything, they're all hanging from the beams at the Garden. Yeah. And some psycho, it's usually the craziest person.
Yeah, the local guys. Like the tour rigger will basically oversee where to put them, depending on, weight limits and restrictions and what I have to move today. And if I move this, what else has to move because it's in the way of something else.
Yeah, because to go back to you and the dominoes, if the riggers hang things in a place, it affects your job 12 hours later and what it sounds like in the arena because they're moving your flashlight around.
Yeah,
basically.
things have to move on it. You have to be flexible, right? We don't work in a vacuum. Like every decision they make early is a domino effect later on. So the caterers go in to cook, the riggers go in to hang chains with the crew. The next thing that's going to come in generally is lighting and power for everybody. Power will come in. Generally, the rigging package will have everybody's electrical requirements and the wiring on it. So that gets laid out.
Feeder cable.
Feeder cable. That's right. Lots of it. Every department, video, lighting, catering, rigging, audio, automation. If you have moving lights, things like that. So you'll have, a ton of people in there running wire on the floor first thing in the morning. If you're carrying a stage, specialty stage or something that's oddly shaped, like you'll see, Ariana Grande or the Katy Perry, even Luke, my current guy.
Bryan, Luke, yeah.
The American Idol, Luke Bryan. They have specialty stages, stuff that's specific to them. And that comes in, it gets built on the opposite end of the arena. And it becomes this massive jigsaw puzzle where one department's working on one end, one guy's over here, another guy. Audio will generally come in. They'll start bringing the pieces for the sound system into the building. Then it's going to be like set and lighting will come in. And by about 2:30 in the afternoon, I'd say, maybe earlier, the big pieces of the puzzle are built and they all start getting put together. The lighting goes up, the sound goes up in the air. They'll roll a stage in underneath it. Very rarely do these productions anymore have a stage sitting in place. It takes too long to put stuff up on it. So most guys will carry a stage, and the stage might already have the band's gear on it when it's rolling, because it has to be built at, way earlier in the day because everything else is going to take so long. But that last hour, say like from 1:30 to 2:30, 2 to 3, everything gets put together like one big chunk, stage, thrust, consoles, and everything lights up because then you can power everything because it's in place. And then all of it happens at once. And some artists have like sound check parties. So, 3:00 in the afternoon, we have a bunch of guests coming in, VIPs.
Well, that's why I was going to bring it up because, like, when we were at the radio station, we would give away these sound check parties.
Yeah.
And people would always be like, why do we have to go in the middle of the afternoon? Like, I got to get out of work early and go or whatever. And it's because there's a timeline that gets counted back from when the show must stop.
Yeah.
Which is curfew. And normally it's 11:30, and the band and the crew and the production gets fined if they go over curfew.
That's no joke there.
So you got to count it back. So if the show has to be done by 11 and the band wants to play for 90 minutes and it takes 20 minutes to go from the band before the headliner and you count it back, sound check got to do it at 3:00 in the afternoon. That's why you got to get out of work.
Yeah. And, some of the call times, some tours, you got to start at 3 a.m. Some tours, you can start at 7. I believe on one very, very large tour, I think they started at 1 a.m., the night before or the morning before. So they're looking at almost a 20-hour workday, before they're done at 11, 22, 23 hours. And they, you can't do a show the next day that's more than 150 miles away. And even then, nobody's sleeping, But it's not for everybody. We'll put it that way, right? Because even if people come out who are the greatest sound guys in the world, might not be able to hack the schedule.
It's what a lot of the older bands have talked about. You get a band like the Rolling Stones or something, and it's not that they can't still play. It's not that they can't do those 2 hours on stage, but in a lot of ways, the rigors of the touring and the travel, which is why big, huge, iconic bands like that, the bands will fly so that they don't have to be on the road so much, or why they set up, like Aerosmith sets up a residency in Vegas where they can have some kind of normalized schedule so that they can prolong their careers, because the touring part just physically takes so much out of you.
Yeah, I don't think anybody really sleeps properly in a moving vehicle. As comfortable as modern tour buses are, we sleep in pretty good quarters. If anybody's ever been in the service, it's not an army
shot
barracks.
at. Yeah, you're not.
No, but it's not. I guess it'd be closer to like sleeping in a submarine. Everybody makes the joke about like it's a submarine ride. We're going from here to there for 20 hours in the bus, but we have TVs, we have a kitchen, we have a place to pee, things like that. The amenities are not terrible.
But it's like you're sleeping in a coffin.
Yeah, and the coffin's rattling. It moves. And not everybody's on the same schedule. So you have some people walking around. It's like sleeping in the middle of a moving frat party sometimes. It's it can be a little much. So I don't know that the rest ever comes until the day off when you go to a hotel or you're, somewhere not moving. That gets to a lot of people doing that part of it. I've never had trouble sleeping ever. I mean, I can sleep anywhere, and I fall asleep.
My grandmother used to say that if you can sleep like that, you have a clear conscience.
Yeah, I don't have a clear conscience. I'm just tired.
Go ahead.
I might be like overstating it. It's not terrible. It's not a horrible life.
No, it's just something that to get used to, and not everyone can do it. I mean, when I was driving trucks, I had to sleep in the sleeper cab, and you're sleeping with a rolling engine the whole time because it's 90 degrees outside, and if you want to sleep with air conditioning, the truck's got to be going, and it's loud, and it's...
Well, that's the other half of it is like, we just talked about what happens during the day. Like, while all this is going on during the day, we have a fleet of truck drivers and bus drivers that are sleeping. They work on the other side of the schedule. So when we're going to bed at night, their day is just starting.
Yeah, so basically how it works, with anybody that's a truck driver or whatever, like you got to have so many hours that you're not driving, that you're not in the truck. Yeah. So they bring the buses and they bring the trucks to the venue. You guys go to work. Those guys get driven to the hotel so that they can go to sleep. But they're nocturnal because you guys drive at night after the show. So these guys are now having to sleep at 3:00 in the afternoon or whatever to make sure that they're fresh and legal to drive when the show is over. And then you guys sound check, the band sound check, they open the doors, everybody storms in, the bands go through, and then your band, so you're working for the headliner, so you actually are now, quote unquote, working now.
Yeah.
Like you're actually doing the job that it took you all day to set up. You're actually mixing the show now.
Yeah.
And when it's over, we all leave and go home and go to bed. And as soon as the show's over and the house lights come on, you guys go back to work. Yeah.
Yep. Chairs get off the floor. Everything starts coming down, gets taken apart, like in a hurry. In a hurry. That's the part that nobody ever sees, right? How fast it comes down. And it's the question you hear, one of the questions you hear through your whole career. How long did it take you guys to set this up? Oh, about 9 hours. How long does it take to get it down? About 2.5. What? I mean, it's a high-speed construction site in both directions. It can be dangerous. You got to pay attention. This isn't the 1970s where everybody's yee-hawing anymore, right? These are it's like a much smarter industry than it was when I started. And I hear the bitching about the millennial this and the young kids that, but everybody I've had on my crews for the last 10 years are much smarter than I was when I got out here. Education aside, but they're much more attuned to the job they're going to do. And that's in every department, right? Video is much more complex. Everything is digital networks. IP addresses and computers, and it requires a different process than it would have when I started, where you just had to physically be able to deal with being up 18 hours and know how to wire, basic electrical stuff. It's a lot different now. And that kind of weeds people out. It weeds down. And then it really does become like, we see a lot of people come out of the military, believe it or not. They get trained and teched out there. It's turned into a different type of person in the touring world. And a lot of people don't give them the credit they deserve.
Well, then you look at a venue that's got a show going out. If you've ever gone to the Garden for it's different if it's the same band 2 or 3 nights in a row, because you guys can leave the gear, come back tomorrow. You don't got to set it up because it's already set up. Yeah. But everybody's seen a week or two at an arena, and one night Mariah Carey's there, and the next night Slayer's there, and the next night so-and-so's there. So you guys are wheeling your stuff out, passing versions of yourselves on a different tour, waiting for you to hurry the fuck up so they can start their day, and you're just finishing yours.
Yeah, and I'll add another group in there that doesn't get enough credit, the house crews that turn it over. There's some times where the seasons between hockey and basketball overlap. And you have a show, hockey, into basketball, into a show, into basketball. Into hockey. These guys, they're turning it from an ice surface to
parquet.
Yeah, right. So we tend to forget them. It's like, oh shit, they're still working on the dasher today, or these guys are still taking the floor, putting flooring in that we can put over the top of the ice. Yeah, they've been here for a week. This is the 4th time they've had to turn the building over.
Yeah, it's the NHL playoffs right now, a-hole. There's stuff going on.
Yeah, zip it up. There was an instance with funny enough, it was Bob Seger in Detroit at the old Palace at Auburn Hills. He did 14 nights over 18 days, and we had to keep moving out because the Pistons were still playing there. So we do 4 shows, take the whole thing down, move out, go to a hotel for a day, come back, load the whole thing back in there, do another 3 shows, take it out again. Basketball team would come in. It got to the point where we'd load in and oh, hey, Mel, how's it going? We're going to be a little bit behind this morning. And that's the thing you see, when you have the days off. There's some instances it's a lot of work for a lot of people. That's the other half we don't talk about. Now while we're off is how many people are really not working. It isn't just us, right? There's a lot of people affected.
That was one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you, because it keeps coming up over and over again on the podcast, and it keeps coming up over and over again in Cocktails in the War Room. Obviously, we're not living in a normal world. And so the industry, Will Hunt from Evanescence said it beautifully when I talked to those guys a few months ago, that our biggest export in the United States is our culture. It's the thing that churns our economy globally more than I think most people realize. The movies, the music, the theme parks, our culture is our biggest export. So when we talk about a strong economy, the business you and I both work in, the music business, is part of what drives the U.S. economy. And that part of our economy shut down first, and most likely is going to be the last part of the economy that comes back when we get to the point where we're allowed out of our hermetically sealed homes again after the coronavirus is at a place where it's manageable. And in between that, there's thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that can't work. And every band that I talk to talks about the importance of their crew. I've asked every band this because they've all talked about what happens to their crew when you guys aren't on the road, because you guys just go from tour to tour to tour. And when there's no tours, there's no job. And I asked them okay, well, what is your tour like if you don't have a good guitar tech? What is your tour like if you don't have a good sound guy? What is your tour like when you don't have a good lighting guy? And they're like, the whole show goes to shit. Like, they're the ones that make us look and sound good. And now what?
You do whatever you have to. You do whatever you have to. I know tons of people in the industry have gone into, like, you know, they're driving for Amazon, Uber Eats, construction jobs. It's really it's telling, like, how flexible most of the people in the business are. You know, Zito is a production manager for Katy Perry, opened up Rock and Rolls in Nashville, where they're baking. He and his wife opened a bakery, and they would deliver food. Everybody figured something out, or didn't, you know. But for the most part, I see a lot more creative thinking, you know, and we're a creative business. Everybody, the thought process, like what we do, is not typical. So the solutions to our problems aren't typical either. It's really hard to imagine it, and now we don't have to. We're living it. But it's not. It's definitely not the end. Like we said, we were speaking earlier. It's like, you know, tomorrow afternoon, this will come back, and it will come back roaring. People want to go out. People want to go do things. They don't want to be at home. No, you know, not that they hate their houses.
No, but everybody, like, the last show I went to was at the end of February in Vegas. I saw Bush at the House of Blues. If I had known that was going to be the last show I went to for the whole fucking year, I would have ordered an extra beer. I would have sang more songs. I would have savored it more, because I always knew how much I loved going to concerts. But when you're told you can't go for 10 or 11 months or a whole year, you really understand how much you miss it and how much you love it.
Yeah. And I mean, we're talking about it from the point of, I love being there and going it. You know,
now imagine you're that, boy, I love to be able to work and pay my mortgage.
Yeah. There's a little bit of you know, it's hard to say. It's hard to describe. You know.
Well, unfortunately, I know what that ends like, too, because my radio station's gone. So I know what that.
God. Oh, my God. I don't mean to laugh, but things come to an end. I mean, the appreciation that I've gathered for what I had while I had it is it's indescribable. You know, to think that, like, it's a good possibility that I could never go back to it again. But I don't think that. I just don't think that. Like, eventually we're going to do this again. And
the concerts are going to come back. The question is when and how.
Yeah. I don't know. Honestly, if anybody tells you they know what's going to happen, they're full of shit. I mean, this is an animal, a virus, a thing that, you know, I'm a sound guy. What do I know? Am I going to go argue with Dr. Fauci, or I'm going to argue with the CDC, or, you know, if you think you know more than any of these people, you might be in the wrong room. You know, I'm not that guy. I have to follow. My whole life has been like, follow a procedure, a process, something you can repeat over and over again. I have no idea what these people do, but I'm really thankful that they're all doing it. You know, everybody, you know, Oxford Labs and the viral team working on antibodies and all the science that goes in behind it. We should be really thankful that they're doing it and supportive.
Thank God that Pfizer sold many of those dick pills as they did, because that's where all that money went, is trying to find this vaccine now. So
but that was an accident.
Those boners for the last 20 years, thank you guys for buying those pills.
Yeah, all us old dudes.
But it comes up all the time where, you know, okay, well, when is it going to happen? So this week, Dr. Fauci said that when we get to 70% immunization, he literally said that's when concerts will probably come back. But, you know, that's a number that, like, we can't even. So the reason why the concerts aren't back yet is because it's not because the bands don't want to tour. It's not because the crews don't want to tour. It's not because of anything. It's because at the end of the day, there's liability, and concerts have massive liability. We've all heard the stories about the riots and the trampling and the pyro accident or the this or the that. Like, the concert business is not without risk. And this is a risk that's probably worse than any risk they've ever had to deal with, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, we had H1N1, that the pig virus just fly. I don't remember what it was. I just remember it as H1N1.
Yeah, the swine flu, and it started in the United States. So we never called it the American swine flu, but it started here.
No, that's like I was in the middle of a tour with Stained when it happened, and we were doing casinos, and it was just like, the catering at that point was we were going to go eat at the buffet, like. Oh, no, we're fucking not. I'm not eating in the middle of that.
Can you think of a place that's less safe to eat in the middle of some kind of viral pandemic than a buffet at a casino?
No. On a good day, that's not happening. No offense to Caesar's Palace, crab legs, all you can eat bullshit. I'm not doing it. Definitely not doing it when Bob from Des Moines has got like a serving tray full of crab legs and hush puppies walking around because he doesn't want to go back for a second trip. But yeah, we've had this before. We've been through 9/11. We've had things happen.
Yeah, that disrupted the business
resilient.
In a way. Yeah.
Yeah. This has taken longer. And I mean, maybe you could bitch and moan about, it didn't have to. If everybody had just sat still. I always come back to that Michael Madsen line from Reservoir Dogs, right? They get in a fight, and if they hadn't have done what I told them not to do, they'd all still be alive.
Yeah.
It's a crass way to put it, but, there's got to be some truth to that.
Well, and we're living in a world that's more globalized than ever, It's like a plague 100 years ago didn't spread the way it spreads today because we travel and we're so, like, you could just get on a plane and be in Africa tomorrow. You couldn't do that 100 years ago. You'd get on a steamship and show up 3 months later. And like, it's a different world now, and trying to close borders and airports and who gets let in and who doesn't and who's essential and who's not. Because even though they closed borders, the essential people were still coming and going.
Yeah. Yeah. Everybody forgot the supermarket workers. I spent two days a week at Home Depot when this started, just trying to catch up on home projects that I'd let go. Or you still
poor husbands through this whole thing and your honey-do list, man.
Well, it was something to do, right? It's
right.
Just, you take stuff on, but we're resilient people, and we're going to come back. And the biggest thing about it is that it doesn't matter what language you speak. Everybody is all about coming back to see shows, and they'll do it. There's no way it doesn't happen again.
It is going to be different though. And that's the biggest question is like, how do they pull it off? Like, do you have to get the vaccine to go to the show? Is it 70% immunized like Dr. Fauci says? How do you prove it? Like, is the band comfortable? Are they not? I mean, there were bands that over the summer were doing those drive-in shows, and people were trying to figure things out, but
it's a question of figuring it out. Like, we're not stupid.
And it's not going to be an overnight thing where like you just flip a switch and like everybody's on tour.
No. There won't be enough buildings. I mean, literally, you could sell out every stadium with every band in a weekend. You could that would probably happen here. We're Americans. We're arrogant to the point of like, we're doing this whether it's good for us or not, which is a good thing sometimes, right?
Yeah.
You got to plow through it. You don't listen to everybody telling you can't do it. You just figure out a way to do it. That's where it'll be.
It is crazy to like watch, like obviously like everybody else, I've had all this time to, watch TV, binge watch stuff. And it's crazy to watch something like Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives where you're just watching people at a restaurant sitting next to each other, no masks, because the show got recorded 2 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And then you watch like concert footage and like you're rubbing up against a sweaty guy next to you and the guy behind you's coughing because he just took a hit off the joint that he smuggled in his pants, and he hands it to you, and half hour ago it was under his balls and now he's handing it to you like this offering, and the lead singer's sweating on you and you're happy about it and he's spitting and it all sounds so glorious now, but it's horrifying considering what it is that we're living through right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, it goes away. It goes away. It's not going to stay. People are they're not that. Nobody wants to be trapped. Everybody wants to go out.
Yeah.
They will again. I mean, I can't state it any other way. You know, I remember 9/11 clearly. You know, that was a horrific thing.
Were you on tour with Godsmack then?
Yeah. Yeah, we were loading into Augusta Civic Center. It was very weird. We were loading in. The caterers, somebody came down from catering yelling, "Oh, plane just crashed into the World Trade Center." Oh, it's got to be an accident. That's got to be horrible.
That's what everybody said.
My uncle worked in the building. So let's try and call him. Nothing, right? So now we're starting to panic a little bit. Oh, the second one just crashed into it. And then, there's another plane that just crashed in Pennsylvania, you know. And then, we were out. They were just, I don't remember whether it was Civil Air Patrol or some uniformed personnel showed up and said, "We're shutting the building down. You got to go." So we put everything back in and went to Portland, Maine. And by the time we got to Portland, it was like a scene from, Jason Bourne. There were snipers on the roofs, helicopters flying around. We shut down for a couple of days and went to Atlanta to finish the tour. We did 2 or 3 more shows, and that was it.
Didn't they play Local Bazooka for us?
Yeah. Yep. The American flags, right? Unfurled in front of the PA that day. Yeah. But yeah, it was, but that didn't stop us.
Right.
And this won't either.
Is it nice to know how much you guys are appreciated, not only by the way that all the artists have been talking about how important the crews are, but also about how much everybody misses the shows and therefore obviously misses what you guys do? It's gotta make you feel good that there's been so much attention to the point where they had to put it into the relief package for the Save Our Stages Act, because most of the time with an artist that's fairly successful, those guys are going to be okay. But that all of these artists have been so worried about the crews. Yeah.
Well, Luke, Bryan, my current guy, has been nothing less than spectacular. They keep in touch with us. He wrote us a letter a couple weeks before Christmas. He's fully with us. I know a lot of other artists with their crews have been the same. They're doing what they can for everybody. They're trying to keep it in the light. There is Michael Strickland from Bandit Lighting in Nashville, who's been in front of the congressional hearings on it and has been a real advocate for all of us and the industry as a whole. It's hard not to politicize, and I'm not going to, because it doesn't do anybody any good. But yeah, it's really hard to understate or overstate the level of concern that a lot of them have shown for us. And these are artists first, not business people. You could argue that however you want, but they make a living having fun. They know we have fun doing it.
Yeah, they're the creatives of it, but they didn't get into it to be a businessman. They got into it for the creative and the fun of it, and
they know we're all right there with them. We'd love to be out there with you. To the point where you have some artists who just, early on it looked like they were flouting the rules, just I'm going to go do this anyway. I don't think there's anything mean about it. They want to do it. They want to go out and play. It's the nature. It's just the nature of that person. Some people are cut out to do this. Some people just don't want to, it's hard. You can't lay blame. You can't bother people with it. You just have to figure it out. And we will.
Yeah. I can't wait because, luckily for me, I've had this time now to build my studio and, you would be horrified
really
at how thank you. MCHQ is awesome, but there may be some coiled cables underneath that aren't, wrapped up as nicely as I should have wrapped them. And for the most part, it's pretty good. And, but I've had a lot of time to get this part of things, but I can't wait to be able to grab microphones and go do interviews with bands backstage like I used to. I can't wait to be able to go to the shows. I can't wait to have the shows get announced and start that whole, it feels like I'm living in an alien wasteland between AAF not being around and the whole music business shut down. It's like, what fucking planet am I on? It's nuts.
Yeah. The other thing, that it's like we talked about, these are creatives. At my company, we started VLA, which is a virtual live audience. And they've used it for Metallica and People's Choice Awards, FIFA in Europe, where they do events and the audience is brought into the show with screens. If you watch WWE now, they've got a virtual live audience in the stands where people interact. In some instances, they can talk to the artist. They can do these things from a studio. Very similar to what we saw with Sevendust the other night, except they were showing video content of their own. This is actually everybody like us online watching the show, and your face is in the arena with them. And
it's crazy.
This didn't exist, 14, 15 months ago. This is how fast, this is what I mean, how fast, how creative, how smart they are. How fast it turned around and came around. And, artists went to live streaming, doing concerts. Under Oath did one from Florida at another company down there. I don't remember the studio they were in.
Dropkicks did them from Fenway.
That's right, with Bruce Springsteen. That's right. There's things, right? There's movement to try and help, or movement to try and work, or however you want to put it. I've never considered this work. It's something I love doing. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here anymore if I didn't.
Well, why? Why would you do it for 30 years if it wasn't for the love of it after a while?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I find it hard, to be that guy that's complaining all the time. I'm a moaner at some point here and there. Everybody's going to have a bad day. You just can't have them all in a row.
Right. But you could be that guy that has a 9-to-5 cubicle job that for somebody that travels and does what you do, it's you can't even imagine it.
No, this, like I said, I realized what I had. I'm going to go sing Cinderella songs now. You don't know what you got. Yeah, right. And we're all feeling a little Tom Kiefer these days.
Yep. Yeah,
I'd rather go feel like John Belushi.
Is this the first time you've spent this much time at home?
Yeah. Yep.
And basically your whole adult life.
Yeah. Yeah. That's not, it's a gift. That's the other half. We were talking about some, those glass half full type.
Yeah. It's we have to take, if AAF didn't go away, if the coronavirus didn't happen, I never would have built a studio in my house. I never would have launched the podcast the way that I did. I never would have taken this jump because I was comfortable in this mechanism, in this machine that I was a part of, and why change it? And so now you have to look at it and go, I have this beautiful studio now, and there's all these opportunities and things that I'm doing that I never would have done before, and that's super exciting. And also, wow, I'm spending all this time in the house that I spent all those hours out of the house working to pay for it. And it's I kind of realized there is a certain niceness to being home a little.
Yeah.
My garden, you should have seen my tomatoes this summer, Frank.
Oh, I bet they were gorgeous.
They were so good. They were so good.
Oh, God.
But it is going to be okay, the tomatoes are fine, but I got to get the fuck out of the house. Can I go back to work now? Can I leave the house? Can I go do something? Can I go to a concert or something? And it sounds like, there's some festivals and things starting to get scheduled. And, you hear big companies like Live Nation starting to, say, they're starting to use words like not if, but when. The language is starting to change. And that is making me feel like we're, even though obviously right now the virus numbers are horrifying still, but we know that, the vaccine is there, and we also know that machine is firing up and that people are starting to get immunized. And so, trying to be optimistic.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what else are you going to do?
I know.
I mean, what else are you going to do? Crawl under a rock and just give up?
Binge things on Netflix.
Oh, God. I've seen enough Schitt's Creek. Yeah. I love it, though.
Well, that's the thing, is that when you tour, you've seen every movie.
No, I don't. I don't.
You don't watch anything on the bus? You just get on the bus and go to bed?
I go to sleep. I honestly go to sleep. There's nothing. I'm the old guy in the bus now. I remember, I used to be the youngest dude on the tour, and then all of a sudden I became the old guy in the bus. Go to bed, Grandpa.
The only thing you're not is the guy telling everybody to turn down the music, because you're literally the guy that turns it up.
Yeah, I don't. Like I said, I sleep through anything. It's 20, 25 years of being on a bus. It's really hard to get off it. Once you get on, it's really hard. It's, you get used to that.
Yeah, now you're sleeping in a bed that doesn't move.
That's
quiet.
That's right.
There's somebody in it with you.
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah. Like I said, it's a gift. This was a found year because I have an 8-year-old at home, and she was at school in the house, right, by computer since last March up until this week, and she thinks I'm like the nerd. Like, she's gotten so comfortable with me in the house, she literally taunts me like I'm one of her friends. I don't know if that's good or bad. Like, I'm a noob at Roblox. I don't know what she's talking about when she's watching these weird videos on TV. She knows how to navigate YouTube and the smart TV. Now I'm like, I don't know how to do any of that. I just don't do it.
It's only going to get worse, dude. She's as someone that was once an 8-year-old girl, it only gets worse for you.
Yeah.
Being a girl dad only gets worse as she gets older.
No, but it's the gift. We found a year at home.
Yeah.
And I can be thankful for that.
Yeah. And it's all we can do is be there for each other, which is part of the reason why I wanted to have you on, because the whole purpose of the podcast is, it's a rock lifestyle podcast. And part of it is to talk to the people that make the instruments, that do the stuff behind the scenes, that make the band and the music that we love sound and look the way that it does. And I think you have a job that people see but don't really understand. They don't know, we just like to yell at you when it doesn't sound right.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd rather get yelled at every now and then.
Turn it up, you pussy!
Yeah, that's another, depending where you are in the world, you can turn it up, you can turn it down. That's one of the lessons I learned, funny enough, way back. It was like, depending where you are on planet Earth, like a bad comedian who can't read the room.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of a thing. You're in Poland, you can't make it loud enough. There's no such thing as too loud. If you go to South America, there's no such thing as too loud. You go to Switzerland, they're going to turn on you quick. They just don't culturally do that to themselves. Nobody's in the house listening to Slipknot with the volume dimed out. They're just, it's a very different thing. You get to what are you doing? Why are you doing this to us? Oh, nothing. This is what I did yesterday in, Krakow. Is this not good today?
I went and saw Judas Priest in Romania, and rabid metal fan. I was like,
yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a whole other level.
One of my highlights of life of doing this was at Rock in Rio with Alice in Chains in front of Metallica. And it was insane how passionate and just completely losing themselves in the show that they are. When you hear, or Metallica in Germany is just about frightening, because when you hear 60,000 Germans shouting, die, 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 it's a little, that'll set the hair on your neck, for one reason. But,
those South American metal fans, all the bands talk about it, that it's just a whole other level of passion down there.
Yeah. Yeah, they're crazy, but they're crazy in a good way. I mean, they're not doing anything. Russia, everybody, it's, again, music and everything we do crosses all these boundaries. Like all of that goes away. Kids are kids. Doesn't matter what language they speak, they're into it.
Well, music is the language that we all speak. I mean, you could, like when I was in Romania watching Judas Priest, I was watching people sing every word that didn't speak English. But they knew every word to the Judas Priest songs, but they only spoke Romanian.
Yeah, it's amazing. It really is an amazing thing. That's one of the things that I love so much about this is that there are no strangers in a concert. Like everybody's there for the same reason. And it's really hard to describe. I don't know if I'm paying attention to it or if I noticed it a long time ago, but like, you hear a riff, a couple of notes, a drum fill or something that's signature to a song, go back to like whatever it might be, or whoever it might be, but you like 70, 80, whatever number of people in the place.
In Germany, when you hear that's all you hear. That's all you need.
Yeah. And that's everybody's in the same place, right? Or they're all remembering where they were when they heard it the first, or whatever makes it significant to them. It's not something you can recreate, like, because if you show somebody a picture of something, some people may hate it, but the reaction to notes, seems to be something that gets past like any kind of censoring. Like you just either like it or you don't, and if you don't like it, you aren't at that show anyway.
Right.
It's just it's a much different medium than anything else.
Before I let you go, I know one thing about touring, especially the last night of a tour, when a tour has been together for dates and dates and dates. And a lot of people may or may not see them. Sometimes they do it on stage. The practical jokes that get played from one band to the next and one crew to the next are legendary.
Oh, yeah.
What's the best one you ever saw? Whether it got played on you or the band you were with at the time. I mean, there have been things where they've dropped cases of ping pong balls out of the rafters onto the band while they were playing. I mean, some of these practical jokes are unbelievable.
There's the Canadian band Monster Truck.
Yeah.
So they were in support of Alice in Chains, and great guys. Everybody got along so well. We were going across Canada, and we were finishing up in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and they took every roll of gaff tape we had left, and they flipped it inside out and made circles with it, like you would, to tape something. Yeah, to tape something up to a wall, like a piece of paper.
A loop out of it.
Made a loop out of it, except they made hundreds of them. They had us making them like all afternoon, hidden in a dressing room. So right before they went on stage, they started putting them out. All our crew and the local hands started putting these things out all over the stage. These guys don't play with wireless. They have all wired guitars. So as if that wasn't bad enough, the lights go down, they walk onto the stage, and immediately everybody looks like a Yeti. Like they've got all this gaff tape stuck to their feet, cables are stuck to the floor. It's just a mess, and nobody can move. As if that wasn't bad enough, all of a sudden, these little like remote control trucks came out. Like, a fake monster truck, like a lifted truck that they had gone to Toys R Us. So now these guys are on stage playing their opening song, trying to rock out. Nobody can move. And there's all these little toy trucks rolling around on stage.
Wait, who did it? Monster Truck did it to Alice in Chains, or Alice in Chains did it to Monster Truck?
Alice did it to the Monster guys. Let me tell you, that set change was horrible. They were trying to get everything off the stage, and everything's covered in tape, and they're just like, we're going to get you. They would not let the crew leave the stage. Like, nobody's leaving. Don't get away from that drum set. If you see any of those guys come up here, I don't care what you do, hit them with a stun gun. They're not doing nothing to us tonight. But I got I got talked to because I was going to play a trick on the Alice guys. I called like a wrangler because I wanted to get a bunch of chickens to let loose on stage while they did Rooster, because that's how they closed the show.
You know that nothing good. That's what happened with Ozzy. Like nothing good happens with livestock at a concert, Frank.
I know, but I thought it would have been the greatest thing ever to let a bunch of chickens loose up there while they were doing Rooster. It's just dumb ideas. But yeah, we've seen them all. Like some guys, they'll powder a snare drum. The first hit, it's like there's stuff everywhere.
Like Blue Man Group.
Yeah. Van Halen taking away the opening band's, drum set one piece at a time. They leave the guy out there with a hi-hat to finish the show. Dimebag was really good for stuff like that.
Dimebag has videos of him like lighting fireworks in people's butt cracks on his couch when he's not on tour. So when he was on tour, it was a whole other thing.
Yeah, those guys really were legendary at effing with everybody. And I mean, Sebastian Bach had a guitar player with used to wear this like this green sequin tuxedo with these giant wings. I don't know what it was about, but that was his shtick. Well, Dime decided one day he was gonna like rig this up. So he came out there and like you would make for your 8-year-old going to a ballet, angel wings, like made out of wire, wire hanger, and a tutu with a Willie Nelson looking acoustic guitar. And, Sebastian's up there rocking out, doing his thing. And all of a sudden here comes Dime dancing around right through everybody while listening, and nobody could keep a straight face. It's just
how could you? It's Dimebag Darrell in a tutu.
Yeah. The greatest. They were hilarious. But that was, that's a whole, there's levels to this game, right? They were on a whole nother level.
I don't think did anybody ever get Vinny and Dime with a prank? Because they were just the kings of it. Like, did anybody ever succeed at fucking with them? Because they fucked with everyone and were so good at it.
If anybody has, I've never heard of it. Honestly, I've never heard of it.
And what's great about him is that if somebody did get him, they would have loved it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Like if you were actually able to pull one over on them, they would have loved it.
Yeah, I think I honestly can't imagine that anybody's ever gotten one over on those two. There's just impossible to imagine. We've seen everything. Phil get knocked off the stage by his cousin swinging on a rope, in his underwear. Like these things, they sound bizarre to the normal person.
But that's Tuesday for Pantera in the heyday.
Yes.
It's just Tuesday.
Oh, God.
Oh, I can't wait for tour pranks.
Oh, God. Yeah. There was another good one. Tim McGraw and Luke. Luke, I guess, had just started coming into, his own. And his wife bought him a recreation of a Bronco truck that he had driven way back in the day, like a Bronco Jeep. So they would tote it around behind the tour bus on a trailer. So he'd get into town, he could get on the thing and drive around. Well, I guess Tim McGraw decided, well, we're going to fix this. And they hired a tag artist in San Francisco to tag his truck. Except he tagged it and covered it back up again. I think it was toward the end of the tour. Hey, buddy, I got you a present. I hope we've had a great time with you. And they yanked the cover off it, and they had painted this beautiful truck that had been restored that his wife had given him. And didn't know what to do. Like the look on his face was just shocking. And Tim just walked off. Well, got to go, man. I got to go to work just as his show is starting. So he walks, leaves him out there. Turned out that the paint was water soluble. They just painted it with water-based paint so they could wash it off. But he didn't know that. Yeah, some of it borders on oh my God, what have you done?
Because here's poor Luke thinking you destroyed this sentimental gift my wife gave me.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, a garden hose and it's gone. Because Tim McGraw's not a dick.
Well, who knew at that point?
Well, that's what I mean.
Yeah, they're all crazy. You've heard about all the Ozzy stuff with Iron Maiden, and they are just They're relentless.
Yeah. Well, all of those bands, I think there's something about that generation of metal bands from England, you know, that it's just like between like Ozzy and Maiden and Priest, it's like that whole, like the fucking stories and like what's you get all those bands firing on all cylinders, touring at the same time. I mean, you and I definitely got into the business at the right time, but if we gotten in like 10 years earlier, like we would have seen.
We may not have survived.
Yeah.
We may not have survived. I know. That was a rougher crowd than I've ever been with, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when I was doing tech stuff, it was like the mid-90s. So it was like, can you imagine like the roadie pranks when like Guns and Motley Crue and all those bands were like in the mid to late 80s?
No. And that's a level of excess I never saw.
Right. Yeah. Things changed by the time you and I kind of got in there in the 90s, and it still was crazy, but it wasn't the same. But I've heard the stories.
Oh, yeah. Well, the guys I learned from once I got out on the road had already been there.
Right.
And they're like, oh, you kids, you haven't seen anything. You know, this guy used to do. He did what? Are you kidding? Oh, no. Some of the old Polaroids, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Jesus.
I
Put
know.
that thing away, dude.
Can you imagine if we had like TikTok and Twitter and Skype and camera phones back in the day? Like,
no, not at all.
None of it would have survived.
It's already rough enough. That's all you need is proof of stuff that went on. Kidding?
The legends are better.
Yeah, and I honestly don't think most of those years could have been worse than people say they are. You know?
Yeah, these stories aren't exaggerated. They really were that crazy. I mean, just a couple weeks ago, you know, when I was doing the sit rep, the music news, was the anniversary of Nikki Sixx dying.
Yeah.
And I'm reading this whole story that the other three guys in the band were told he was dead, and like were dealing with that before they found out that they were able to revive him, and then they brought him back to life.
Yeah, Lazarus.
It's craziness.
Yeah. My wife would literally read that book, The Dirt.
Oh.
And she would stop in bed and just like, hang on, listen to this.
And the movie was good, but there's no way they could have done everything that's in that book in the movie.
I honestly, I didn't read the whole book. I got the excerpts and the highlights from Chrissy.
Yeah.
And I just...
Who, by the way, for anybody that's listening, Frank's wife, Chrissy, worked on Real Rock TV with us for years at WAF. So we all go way back.
Yeah, we're all roadies.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the other half of why our marriage is successful. Like, we met on tour. Everybody knows what it is. Like, this is not a surprise. You know,
yeah.
I didn't marry a girl from the farm in Iowa.
Yeah, well, it's like me marrying my husband. Like, he's in the military. I get it. I understand it.
Yeah.
You know what you're getting into.
Yeah. And if you don't, you haven't been paying attention.
Yeah, right. I don't know if he quite knew what he was getting into, but I definitely knew what I was getting into.
Yeah. No, that's good. It's been a great 12 years.
Yeah,
right?
I know. I can't believe it. That's why, like, when we were talking about actually doing this, because you and I have been messaging each other back and forth for months about when we were actually going to do this. And I tried to think about when it was that you and I met. It had to have been that Godsmack show on Ozfest. It had to have been.
That sounds about right.
I don't know when I would have met you before that, because you were in Texas. So it had to have been Godsmack at Ozfest.
Yeah, that's... it was 22 years now.
I know. That's what I mean.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's hard to think of that. Man, I'm going to catch a lot of hell from people calling me grandpa again. I'm going to have to beat the shit out of a few people when I hear it. I hate that. I really do. I hate it. I got accused of coloring my hair a couple of days ago.
No way.
Yeah,
like Grecian formula just for men?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. I don't buy that stuff. I've seen it. Like, you know, the hair probably isn't such a bad idea. When you color the beard, you've committed at that point.
You're
you start
in.
looking at the sheriff of Nottingham. What are you doing with that thing? Start looking like Professor Severus Snape. What's his name? Rick? Nakatomi Tower. The guy gets chucked off.
Oh my God, why can't I remember his name? I love him so much.
That's because we're old. Can't remember shit anymore.
Oh, don't tell me that.
Rick.
Now people are screaming at us.
Are they?
They're going to be when they listen to this and we can't think of his fucking name. Yeah.
Oh, who got chucked off Nakatomi Towers on Christmas Eve?
Alan Rickman.
Alan Rickman.
What is wrong with us?
Old. We're aged.
I know.
I mean, we're not useless. We're just, tires are getting a little flat.
We're experienced.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
I'm not old. I'm vintage.
Vintage is cool, man.
I know.
Vintage is cool.
Yeah.
Tell your daughter that when she's making fun of you because you don't know how to use YouTube. Just tell her you're vintage. Tell her how cool vinyl is now.
Yeah. I went through the radio a while back and she just started in with old people music in the back of the car. Just deadpans it. Old people music. I'm like, just shut up back there before you kill us both. The other day I turned on the radio and I was like mindlessly just trying to keep my eye on the road and just, switching stations with the scan. And this is good. I like this. Oh, this is another good song. I'm going to leave it here. Finally get to a red light, look down to see the station. Classic. The oldies. I was like, mother.
I know.
Think like Panama's oldies.
And you went right by 107.3 because if you don't, it hurts your soul.
Well, I don't even know what's there anymore.
Christian rock. Yeah.
I'm not even going to address that. I'm not even going to address that. Not at all.
No.
Like, that's a contradiction in terms.
Yeah. That's why that's literally why we ended the broadcast the last night we were on the air with Black Sabbath. Because we were like, you know what? If we're handing it over, we're going to make sure it's all Satan before it goes.
We were home. By the time that happened, we were home in bed and we were listening to it. We were like, this is awesome. This is awesome. This is awesome. And that song came on. We're like, oh, this is perfect. What a thought. I can't wait to hear this goodbye. And then there was nothing. It just ended.
Yeah.
And it was like, holy shit, this is like Apollo 13. We're just out here on our own now. There's nothing. It's a heartbreaking ending. I'm sorry to say it. I mean, I don't want to bring it up. But
I mean, it's we tossed and toyed about what the last song should be. We put a lot of thought into it. There were the people with the obvious Stairway to Heaven and like whatever, but Black Sabbath started in 1970 when AAF went on the air. Literally that record came out like 6 weeks before AAF signed on the air. And so we were like, between Satan, Ozzy being the only artist that had literally stayed current for all 50 years, like released a new record, like a week before, 2 weeks before he released a new single. And so we were like, well, it definitely should be Ozzy, Black Sabbath. Like, this is what AAF would have been playing 50 years ago. And it was so Satan-y that we thought it was perfect. But we just, as soon as we stopped the AAF chant and the lyrics kicked in at the beginning of the song and we shut the mics off for the last time, it was like we were all just crying in the studio. And to this day, when I hear that song, I know a lot of people that were listening, like when they hear that song, that's what they think of. And we purposefully just let it end and go dark because there was nothing left to say at that point. Like it was just over. And we were just sitting in there and it got quiet and it was just like even now I think about it with everything we've been through since last February, it seems like yesterday in some respects, and seems like it was a lifetime ago in others. Like, I can't believe it was almost a year ago already. It's insane to me that much time has gone by.
Well, you're kicking the shit out of it now.
I'm trying.
You got your own thing going on.
Yeah, I got my studio.
Great.
It's the podcast has been going really well, and I joined the Pantheon podcast network, which is podcasts for music lovers. So I joined this network of all of these other podcast hosts that are all doing stuff that's just music centric, which is awesome. So I'm in this amazing music lover community now. And we'll see what this year brings, but it's already gone a hell of a lot better than I thought it was going to by this point. So I'm pretty excited about it. And thank you for being a part of it.
Oh, I'm honored that you would ask me to come on here and babble about nothing for 2 hours. I fucking love it.
Yeah, no, but I think it's really cool. And I know the feedback from the people that listen to it. I think they're going to be really interested in what the backside of all of this is, and what it's like to be the guy that gets yelled at twisting the sound knobs in the middle of the concert. Like, you're that guy.
Yeah. Well, it's been a unbelievable ride from a bar in an airport grill, Rhode Island, to Gillette Stadium as the an engineer working for some of the acts that I have.
Is that the day, like, of all the gigs in the world? Because I know for me as a DJ, going out on Metallica's stage at Gillette Stadium to introduce the band is definitely in my top 5 moments of my entire career. Was mixing a band at Gillette, being a New England guy.
Oh yeah,
one of those moments.
Yeah, absolutely. The only way it could have gotten any better was if that was all I ever did. It's hard to explain. Like, you work a long time, you do these things, and a lot of guys and women. I say that as the royal we or they. Work hard and never get to do what I do. So I don't take it lightly. I don't take it for granted. But yeah, being at home at Gillette Stadium, sold out, and you're in the middle of the floor and everybody's having a great time is kind of hard to beat.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything like it. The only other thing that came close was selling out Dodger Stadium when Luke sold out Dodger Stadium, because he was the first country artist to sell it out.
Wow.
So we had this one on this coast and that one over there. And there's a really great, almost iconic picture of him carrying his 2 boys off under his arms off of Dodger Stadium stage as he's walking away. So it means a lot to them. It definitely means a lot to us. And it means a lot to the fans too. It's one of those things you can't forget them. Doesn't matter what I do. It matters, but nobody pays money to see me. They pay money for me to be out of the way to watch a show and listen to it the way it should be.
And to be part of it, which I think is the part we're all dying to get back to more than anything, is to be in that place with a bunch of other people experiencing that thing at the same time that you love.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, you couldn't have put it any better.
Well, then I got to end the interview there on a high note.
All right, with that, I'm
5
leaving.
minutes ago, we couldn't remember who the fuck Alan Rickman is. I got to end it on this high note now.
All right. Well, thank you again for having me. I loved it.
There he is, Frank Sgambellone. I know I ruin that song for you every time you listen to I Stand Alone by Godsmack. And before everybody sends me corrections, I know that song is off the Scorpion King soundtrack, not The Mummy. But it's tied to The Mummy, but you know what I mean. Huge thanks to Frank. We've been friends for so long, and it was awesome having him on the podcast, and I hope you learned a lot, too. Thanks to our sponsors this week, DCU, or Digital Federal Credit Union at dcu.org, and obviously, mistresscarrie.com. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to click subscribe so you don't miss anything on the Mistress Carrie podcast. New episodes every Wednesday, and Monday through Friday, you can get caught up with all of your rock news, music headlines, and industry info with the Sit Rep, and it's all in less than 5 minutes. And if you don't mind, leave me a comment and a 5-star review, too. And join me for a cocktail every Tuesday night at 8:30, live on my Facebook page for Cocktails in the War Room. The Mistress Carrie Podcast, a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network.